As the recount attempts loom, Donald Trump continues to fill key positions in his administration. Trump has tapped former Labor Secretary Elaine Chao to be his Secretary of Transportation, and Georgia Congressman Tom Price. He's been picked to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. But Mr. Trump has yet to decide on a Secretary of State. Washington Post reporter Ed O'Keefe is on Capitol Hill and joins us now. Okay, Ed, after meeting with Petraeus on Monday, Mr. Trump met today with Chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Bob Corker of Tennessee. And he'll sit down today with a private dinner, Mitt Romney, later tonight. Does one of these candidates have the inside track for the Secretary of State position?
Oh, it's hard to know, Rena, in part because some of the other picks that have emerged were folks that we weren't necessarily talking about. And that always seems to be the rule when there's speculation about these positions, that whoever's not being talked about or not being talked about as much is maybe more likely to get it. But look at who he's talking to. Giuliani, former General Petraeus. There's been talk that other generals may be in the mix. Bob Corker stopping by again today to talk about it. And, of course, Mitt Romney tonight. These are all kinds of people that would for the most part, please Republicans up here on Capitol Hill and probably most Republicans overall. I think the most controversial probably to Trump supporters would be Mitt Romney, given what he had said about Mr. Trump over the course of the campaign. But beyond Republicans, maybe Rudy Giuliani and David Petraeus would be controversial up here on Capitol Hill and in the general public for various reasons, for what Giuliani has done since serving as mayor, and of course for the trouble that General Petraeus got into regarding his affair with his former biographer.
Ed, what do you read into the selection of Elaine Chao as Secretary of Transportation and Tom Price to head up the Department of Health and Human Services?
Well, there are two people that are going to sail through confirmation hearings and easily get confirmed, most likely, given that you only need a majority of the Senate now to confirm nominees to cabinet posts. But I would say this about both of them. They don't do anything to drain the swamp, as the president-elect would like to do. Tom Price is a long-serving Republican congressman, well-liked across the Republican Party and certainly here in conservative circles in Washington. And Elaine Chao is kind of the epitome of a swamp dweller, with all due respect. She's the wife of the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. She's a former cabinet secretary who's bounced between the public and private sectors over the course of Republican administrations. Not exactly the kind of Washington outsider that Trump has vowed to install in his government. That said, again, she would enjoy easy Senate confirmation, probably get a lot of Democrats as well, given that Mitch McConnell is her husband and that she has served before and is seen as a relatively qualified and well-meaning government official. But Democrats are very quick today to say if she is the Secretary of Transportation, we want to see what her plans are to work on infrastructure spending. Remember, there's been talk of the president-elect about coming up with a new big jobs program to rebuild the nation's roads and bridges and airports. Democrats are eager to do that. Republicans, including Mitch McConnell, Mr. Elaine Chao, are not as plussed about doing that kind of stuff because it would cost so much money.
I want to ask you, I was just confused when I read this tweet. Maybe you can explain it today from Donald Trump, talking about possible jail time or loss of citizenship for burning an American flag. Were you surprised, as I was when I read this, and where did this come from?
My policy, Rena, right now on the president-elect is to not be surprised by anything he does or says. We've seen he does all sorts of things, and at this point it's just another day and it's another tweet. But this is interesting. It opens up a whole new line of debate and inquiry. Look, the Supreme Court has said it's protected free speech. If the president-elect feels differently, so be it, but he'd have to convince a Supreme Court of that. And this is an emotional issue for a lot of people. Obviously, there are many who believe it should be a crime. It should be that it's seen as one of the highest levels of disrespect to the country, whereas others say, look, it's a perfectly acceptable mode of expression and one that's been protected and should remain so. There's some speculation that he may have been watching a morning news program that was talking about flag burning by some students somewhere in the country, and he was reacting to that. And others have been saying, look, some of the reasons that he continues to put out these kinds of things is he's trying to distract from other reporting that's being done about his government in waiting, or about him, or about members of his family. So, I'm curious to see how the response to his tweeting and his comments overall continues to be reported on and received by the general public, whether people are going to start disregarding it or continue to take it seriously. We've never had a president-elect who tweeted as much as he did, and certainly not on these types of subjects. But I would caution, as I have before, don't be surprised by this stuff. Just take it for what it is, talk about it, and see what happens.
From a veteran political reporter. All right, Ed, we're going to follow you on that. But I want to ask you also about sort of this last night tweet that Trump had, attacking CNN on Twitter for saying that Trump's voter fraud claims are not true. I mean, what does this say about the working relationship that the press can expect with President-elect Donald Trump?
It's still pretty sour, Rena, and I think there's a lot of concern across the news industry about how exactly relations with the White House will go. You know, Secretary of State is one that hasn't been filled. There's been no talk yet of a White House communications director or a press secretary, the two people who really would set the tone between the White House and the Fourth Estate. There was a meeting, of course, last week that some of our colleagues attended where we know that the president-elect got pretty hot under the collar about it. I think there are many, though, as you heard the Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy say earlier today, that would like to see Mr. Trump move on from the election, focus on next year, and try to make bygones be bygones. We'll see, but what he did there, taking on CNN and a specific reporter, is par for the course, something he did throughout his campaign, and frankly did with the support of all those people who voted for him.
Ed O'Keefe from Capitol Hill with the Washington Post. Thank you, Ed.